did the wrap up in July at the last meeting. I said, oh great, that gives me lots of ideas for things I can track. Unfortunately, I did not get to figure out how to find out how early the cats were waking us up in the morning, but I did end up tracking 2 things, one of which I will probably spend more time talking to you about. So I went back into tracking time. Yes. I went back to tracking time. And I started tracking clothes. We're going to talk about tracking time because that's probably slightly more general interest in tracking clothes. Alright, so a couple of quick things. View, Sacha Chua. Okay. Oh, awesome. Okay, so tracking time. I've got about a month's worth of time tracking data now. I used to track time a lot, and I stopped doing it because keeping it up to date with my work logs was getting to be a bit of a hassle. But then again, I started doing it again last month. So my key questions were, well, how do I really spend my time? How much time do we have to work with? Because you know what it is, we think we work so much and we have so very little time for ourselves and we don't get enough sleep, when truth to tell, we either overestimate or underestimate some of these numbers. And also, how do I start changing the way that I use time? So, quick introduction first, how do I do this? Time tracking is actually really easy. You can account for every single minute that you use during your day. If you've got a smartphone, iPhone or Android or probably BlackBerry, there are apps for this. So on my Android smartphone, all I have to do is to check in when I wake up, switch tasks throughout the day. So for example, when I wake up, okay, I go to the routine task. When I start working, I switch tasks to routines. It automatically timestamps it and it stores it somewhere. So this is the kind of application I work with. It's very easy to check in and out. I can look at my day breakdown, week breakdowns, month breakdowns right there. And this one also has Google Calendar integration, so I can see my day nicely laid out. It's pretty nifty. So then you take that and you can get that into a spreadsheet, and then you can start playing around with that. You can find out, for example, how much time you spend eating on average, how much sleep do you normally get, how much time you spend working. Turns out I actually I'm pretty good at sticking at 40 hours a week. All right. I've been using this in my blog. Generally, every week I do a review of my past week and plans for the next one. I go over my checklist and say, okay, these are the things I did. I also include the time analysis. So I'm looking at how much time I spent this week on different activities versus how much time I spent the week before. What's changed and possibly why that's changed. Some weeks I spend more time hanging out with other people. Some weeks I spend, doing lots of cooking. So once you get that data, you can start doing things with it. Then I started saying, okay, if you've got 4 weeks of data or a month of data or longer, then you can start looking for trends. And I find that I'm not really the kind of person who focuses on one interest and stays with it. I tend to shift interests even within a single month. So as you can see, gardening was, okay, there was 1 week I was really into gardening, and then I was like, this community-supported agriculture box is really making me up to here with vegetables and zucchini, so I don't want to do any gardening. Latin has petered off as well, piano has petered off. Electronics I've gotten into, but you don't see a separate category for it because I've been using the discretionary time other for it. And it's a great way to get a handle on the changing ways that you spend your time, which is great for saying, you know how it is when you think you're going to be really interested in something and it turns out you don't actually spend your time doing it, like the sewing machine that's gathering dust in my basement. I will get back to that someday, probably winter, but anyway. So, and then I started saying, okay, how else can I visualize this? And I'm going to show you this little thing that I've started to build. So, this thing that I've started to build, okay. Let me zoom out a bit here. So taking my data from this time tracking thing, this is what my day looks like. The black parts here are sleep. You see here I've started shifting to staying up later and just getting up when I need to, versus getting up to sleep with my somewhat night owl husband. This is work. So generally starting at 9 o'clock, sometimes a bit later. Things like this. This orange, so blue represents work, light blue represents discretionary time, so hobbies, socializing, other things that I want, I choose to do. Orange represents things that I need to do. So this is an unpaid work category. The reason always is cooking. This, for example, this bit over here was the cooking sprint in which we baked 48 portions of roast chicken and lasagna and all sorts of other things. We do all of our cooking in big batches, so then we stick it in the freezer and we don't have to cook for a long time. So you can see my cooking during the week is very sporadic, and then we have these big sprints. And then on the right, I just sum it all up per day so that I can see, okay, you know, how much is work, how much is discretionary time, and so on. And also I can see that my sleep hygiene is very bad. I sleep different amounts each day. But, oh well, that's life. So, fortunately, I can actually compare that with other people. So the OECD, which stands for something I can't remember at the moment, but they do these surveys of people in developed countries, including Canada. So you can compare your numbers against the averages of people in developed countries or people specifically in Canada. And it turns out that I actually work a little bit more than people in Canada do on average. I don't know who they're asking to come up with this number, but okay. And somehow I managed to get away with fewer chores. So that must be why. The report actually has all sorts of other lovely things, such as most people spend their discretionary time on watching television, which is, you know, do something, maybe do the laundry while you're watching television. Anyway, but yes, and it turns out that I sleep slightly less than average, so I can sleep more and still be okay. Cool things to know. So, tracking time has helped me do all this stuff. It's very easy to do. I can just check in and out using my smartphone, and it lets me see, actually, you know what, I've got 4 or 5 hours a day of free time that I can work with, which is certainly enough time to get into a programming project or play around with drawing comics or whatever it is. So when you start seeing that you actually have this free time, then you can make plans for it. And then if you say, well, this thing that I used to spend time on isn't actually worth it, then you can shift time away from that. So that's time tracking. Briefly mentioned, I've also been tracking clothes. I thought that when I started doing this, I would find out that I would, you know, kind of figure out how often I repeat clothes or how many things I have, and it turns out that I don't actually repeat clothes that often, which means I can simplify my wardrobe. Anyway, building your own track is, it's true. Anyway, so these pale splattered jeans and beige, actually I'm wearing the brown plaid flannel blouse today, hence it's there. Anyway, so building your own tracking tools for the things that you can't find in an app is also not that scary. Yes, so time and clothes and other things. Yeah. Yes?
What did you make this in?
This one is built in Rails. So Ruby on Rails. And the visualizations that I showed you were using Raphael JavaScript. So Raphael is a JavaScript library for making graphics. I might shift it to processing because processing also looks really cool. But yeah, this one was actually really easy to have.
Where's the time slot where you program this in there?
That counts as a personal, this one over here. So that's probably those chunks over here. Where it's like, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have a home dashboard where I can kind of start tracking how many library books I go through. So it turns out the Toronto Public Library has a limit of 50 books that you can have checked out at any given time. I hit that and I had to borrow my husband's library card. Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't here. What was the input method?
Oh, so there is an app. Actually, I can show you the interface. It's easier to see when it's big. But I just have an app on my phone that somebody else has written, and it's available for free, although there's a pro version with a Google Calendar integration. And all it does is it gives you a couple of buttons, and you can say check in, check out, or switch task. And that's it. You just say which you select from this list of predefined activities that you've set up, and you can type in extra notes, and that's all you do.
And then you can export the data from that?
To CSV.
Nice.
In different ways. You can get summaries by day, you can get summaries to check in, check out timestamps, and then you can do all sorts of munching.
And what's that app called?
This one is time recording. It's on the Android. If you're on iPhones, I I used to use things like Daily Journal or whatever that was when I was an iPod. So there are apps for this. Apparently time tracking is one of those things that because consultants and lawyers need to do it, there are lots of apps for it. So you just have to play around and find one that works for you. Anyway, it's super easy. It doesn't actually distract me. It helps me stay on track because when I'm clocked into work, I feel less of a temptation to go away from that because I know it's getting logged in under work time and I'm really going to spend time reading Fork. I should check out and go into break mode instead. So it's been very helpful for that. Yeah. And it just takes me, what, a couple of seconds. Let's say, for example, I'm walking already to the subway station. I just click shift to exercise mode. When I'm there, shift to subway, shift to travel. Easy.
Did you ever get behind? Because I was doing a lot of time tracking on my phone and I would forget to
I
shift
know.
backs and I'd be like, oh, 6 hours later, it's like, what the heck was I doing? Where did I get behind versus
Very rarely,
Okay.
mostly
Just
because
me.
mostly because since I shifted to using a belt bag, my phone is always close to me. I found when I didn't use a belt bag, I put my phone down somewhere and I would waste 10 minutes or so trying to find it again. So because I do this before starting an activity, it's just become a habit.
Have a reminder beep every hour.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, sometimes I'm falling asleep and I'm like, oh wait, gotta check out. But that's about it. Yes.
Have you ever adjusted like some major task that you were doing and said drop that task and for something else? Like, have you actually used the data to adjust your behavior yet?
Well, one of the things where it's come up is I actually, so I adjust my work to be roughly within 40 hours a week because if I don't do that, I know it's going to start cutting into my discretionary time or my sleep or all these household things. So as much as work would like to get that time from me for free, not happening. So it's okay. I also noticed, like for example, timing when you're doing the dishes or tidying up around the house gives you an incentive to do it faster. So that's pretty cool too.
Can you talk more about like the motivational effects of time tracking? Because that I think is like, I mean the data is cool, but if there is a big motivational aspect to it, that sounds like a whole other reason you might do it.
So among other things, since I post these numbers publicly on my blog, it's a good way to see, have I been goofing off? Although I did spend a lot of time playing Portal. That was well spent time though. So I'm generally very comfortable with the way that I spent my time. The public reinforcement also helps, as you mentioned. And the other thing that's motivated me to look at this was to figure out how much of these things could I outsource. This idea of, okay, if unpaid work is all the chores that you could theoretically pay somebody to do, how much time would you get if you did pay somebody to do that, and how much would that work out to? Like minus your annual salary or whatever. And I realized, for 1.2 hours a day, where it's probably kind of downtime for me as I'm relaxing by tidying up and sorting the laundry and all those things, it's not that bad. I can do it. That said, I've also decided, you know what, maybe I'll reawaken my virtual assistant experimenting so I can get rid of some of the more tedious online tasks. So let's you make these decisions. Yes.
Do you try online use when you're on the computer?
There are programs that do that. I haven't looked into it much because I often work with 2 laptops, so it's a little kind of funny trying to get everything sorted out and talking to each other. There are programs like Rescue Time that will track the time, how much time you spend in different applications. In general, I'm like, well, you know what, if it's work, then most of the time I'm pretty well focused on work with some occasional side trips so I can have cheeseburger. But that's okay as long as I don't spend too much time on it. And then it's okay. It's alright. Yes.
How much do you think you could automate it? I mean, you know how every day is pretty much usually the same when you're like during the week, right? Is there a way, have you thought of a way to maybe automate some stuff?
I thought about that. Like for example, I have another app called Tasker which lets me detect the call changes. So for example, when I lose touch with my home network, then maybe I should shift automatically to travel mode. And really, since it only takes a couple of seconds and it forces me to be mindful about the activities that I go into, I haven't really felt that push to automate that logging. In terms of analysis, this system that I've been building is a home dashboard plus whatever macros that I have in my spreadsheet. That's and the Emacs functions that I've also kind of played around with are usually enough to get me to my report and thinking about how I spend my time instead of snarled in figuring out what I'm doing, right? So I spend less time munching the numbers and more time figuring out what they need. So time tracking, really helpful, easy to get started with. If you've got a device that you're always using anyway, pretty easy to do. So it'd be great to compare numbers.
Yeah, Chris was going to come, but then he double booked himself tonight. He's been time tracking too. Maybe next time. But thank you.
Yeah.